And although it isn't printed in the bulletin, it was sent in the electronic bulletin, we now baptize Juan Manriquez. As always, I give a few instructions before you witness the baptism of this little guy. Although our young children do not yet understand these things, they are nevertheless to be baptized, for God commands that all who are under his covenant of grace to be given the sign of the covenant as well. God made the covenant with believers and with their children. In the Old Testament, he declared to Abram, "I will establish my covenant between me and you and your children after you in their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be a God to you and to your children after you." And for this reason, in the Old Testament, God commanded the covenant infants to be given the sign of the covenant that then was the sign of circumcision. That children were included and are included in the covenant that God makes with his people is also indicated in that the children of the people of Israel are addressed in the fifth commandment in the Decalogue and the 10 Commandments to Moses as covenant people. The covenant is the same in essence in both the Old and the New Testaments. So rather than rescinding the covenant promise to believers and so to put the sign of the covenant on the children of God's people, God reaffirms it. It declares in Acts chapter 2:39 that the promise is to you and to your children. This is covenant language known from the Old Covenant, known from Genesis 17. And so the New Testament also records 3 household baptisms that apostles performed in continuation of the practice of including whole households and giving them the sign of the covenant. To be sure, because there are 3 household baptisms, you cannot assume that each and every one of them included children, but you can assume that some of them did, because household language in the Bible always includes children. A house or household in the Old Covenant and in the New Covenant includes children of the house. And so church history shows that the apostolic practice of baptizing households and therefore also the children of God's people, and that infant baptism was the practice of the church, documented from the 2nd century on, so that is in the 100s of the Common Era. There's no break in church history or tradition so that you could say the church did not baptize infants until such and such a time. Rather, Irenaeus, one of the eminent church fathers, speaks of infant baptism as the rule of the church in the year 185. Origen, another great church father, confessed to have been baptized as a baby in the year 180, and in the year 248 in his long career and life, he wrote in his commentary to Romans, quote, "The church received the tradition of giving baptism to infants from the apostles." Even earlier than this, Hippolytus, a 3rd century church father, wrote in 215 in the context of children of the covenant that those who could speak and confess faith for themselves were to answer catechetical questions before baptism, and that those who cannot speak for themselves because they are infants or babies, for them the parents had to answer catechetical questions, not unlike the ones that you will hear spoken now that you, Juan Sr. and Elizabeth Juliana, forgive me, that you will answer. So, all this being said, In the New Testament, no less than in the Old Testament, children of believers have an interest in the covenant, and they are included in the covenant, and they receive the sign of the covenant accordingly. Inclusion in the covenant and receiving the sign, outward sign of the covenant, is no guarantee of salvation. Never has been, never will be. Baptism, as was circumcision, is an outward sign of belonging to the covenant people of God. It is not an automatic guarantee of salvation. And so in the New Testament, baptism has replaced circumcision as the covenant sign. Therefore, by the covenant sign of baptism, the children of believers are to be distinguished from the world, marked out as children of the covenant of God, and solemnly admitted into the visible church. That is all, no more and no less.